Maria Yakos is a graduate student in the Communication Disorders at Governor State University. She has a BA in Psychology from Western Illinois University and is a BS in Communication Disorders from Governor State University. Currently, she works as a English language writing consultant for the Latino Center for Excellence. Excuse me.
Okay. I'm going to be speaking from my experience as the Spanish language, English language tutor for the Latino Center, and I have been working in that job for the last about a year. I'm going to try to find my PowerPoint. I also am coming to you as a Spanish speaker of English. I learned Spanish as my first language and began speaking English when I was about 4 years old. And so when we consider bilingualism, it's important to note that there's no two experiences in a bilingual that is the same. In my own family, we have generational differences right within the same generation. My parents came to the United States and began to speak English in their 20s. So when they speak English, they have an accent. And I would say, we'll talk about dominance in a little bit. Dominance is a real relative term. There's a lot of research being done about language dominance, and no one is truly dominant in any one area. You can say that they're always dominant in English or always dominant in Spanish. We'll talk about that a little. But I believe my parents think in Spanish, and that is predominantly their preferred language. I was the oldest. I was not born here. I started interpreting at the age of 5. And my parents were learning English, so Spanish was the main language spoken in our home until I was about the age of 12. So I am the one who grew up with the most Spanish in our home. My sister, who is 4 years younger than I, by the time she was 8, my parents had started speaking more English in the home, so her Spanish is a little bit less proficient than mine. Not that it's worse or better or whatever, but she's a little bit less proficient. She also has worked as an interpreter. I've worked as an interpreter, and both of us feel very comfortable with both languages. My younger sister, when she was about 4, my brother was born. My brother was diagnosed with a language disorder, and during that time, the school psychologist instructed my parents to no longer speak Spanish in the home. And so then our home went from being a bilingual home to being a very monolingual, where that from time to time my parents would lapse into the Spanish, but predominantly the children responded in English. And so my sister and my brother grew up in a much more English atmosphere. And so both of their Spanish skills are very poor. My sister can speak Spanish, but she stutters, and she's very unsure about herself, and my brother can understand it, but he is not able to speak it. So when we talk about, are we all bilingual? Yes, we're all bilingual, but are we all the same bilingual? No. And so there is an individual in here, if I looked at and I asked here, who in here considers themselves bilingual, we all have very, very, very different experiences. And so as we talk about this, I want us to think about it, that it is not a bilingual person who, when they are in school and they're here in your classroom, they're monolingual because they're speaking English, because we tend to think that way. Whether you believe it or not, you're always bilingual. Your other language is always influencing how you think. It is a part of you, and there are things in your language that affect how you feel about things, how you analyze things, and sometimes things come in one language, but they don't come in another language. So we'll go on. And so we are not looking at, we're looking at one person with 2 languages, and those languages are constantly influencing the way the person reacts to their environment and the way the person thinks. So we're going to consider, and that is the approach that I have taken with the Spanish language, English language writing consultant. I don't consider myself a tutor. I consider myself a partner in helping a student to learn how to write. And I don't consider what I see in their writing necessarily as errors. I consider them differences that, even though they are due to their bilingual influence in an academic setting, they need to learn how to adjust that. And so there are some things in their writing that we can celebrate. We want to retain their voice as a bilingual, but we want to help them to be able to apply the rules of the English language and be able to spot when their grammar from Spanish is affecting the way they're writing in English. And regardless of how proficient you are, you will have your grammar from your first language affect. I have to go through my papers, and I will often find prepositional errors. I will find that I have written that like 50 million times. My sister's constantly correcting me on that. She writes for the Tribune, and she gets corrected on it from her editors. And because in Spanish we say que all the time, es que yo quiero ir, and we say que, we just put it in all the time, so then we tend to write it. And so those are some of the things that I think have been very interesting. So we have taken the approach, I've taken the approach to this writing with my background in communication disorders. There is a lot of research out there about what we can expect as patterns of differences. I'm not going to say patterns of errors, because it's patterns of differences, because we're not looking at a bilingual brain as being here's English and here's Spanish, but we have a combination where there's overlap. And so sometimes the Spanish grammar affects the English grammar, sometimes the English grammar will affect the Spanish. Stick around and I can give you a lot of funny stories. English grammar affecting Spanish. Embarrassed in English means you are feeling kind of embarrassed about something. In Spanish, the word is pena. If you say embarazada in Spanish, it means you're pregnant. And so I used that one day, thinking I was saying I was embarrassed. Well, I was only 11, and my father was very embarrassed. Another time, the same, I'm going from English to Spanish. I used the word pepino, thinking I was saying pepper, and when I came home, my grandmother had made stuffed cucumbers, because pepino in Spanish is cucumber. She'd asked me, what should I fix for dinner? And I said, stuffed pepinos. And so when I came home, they were all inside the pressure cooker. So we can laugh at this. This is a very, it is something that we need to understand. There are differences. We need to be happy about them. It makes us who we are. It makes us be able to look at things in a different way. If you have studied a language ever, you know that there are things about that language that change how you view the world. And that is exactly what happens with the bilingual brain. So it's best to address the error by looking at the possible pattern that's created due to the influence of L1. Now I'm using speech therapy terms here. L1 is the first language, L2 is the second language. And that's the way that we discuss it. Language dominance. There is a lot of current research about this subject. Bryce, who is one of my favorite people to research, to look at this research, the concept of dominant language is losing favor as there is more evidence that proficiency in two languages occurs on a continuum, and individuals being able to understand or express some concepts better in one language and others in another language. So we know that sometimes you feel more comfortable speaking about certain things in your L1, other times you feel more comfortable speaking about certain things in L2, and that is a normal part of being bilingual. We also have found, which I'm not going to go into this, but the dominance issue can vary from one situation to the next, but also across the aspects of language, which we're going to discuss next. The aspects of language are syntax, phonology, morphology,